Hi, it's really great to be here. I'm Kelda White. I'm part of Pestle and Daughter, and we're a small company that's been set up to try and reconnect people with nature, whether that's through foraging or through sort of hedgerow medicine or just through reconnecting with plants. And I wrote this title a while ago, Gifts from Your Garden. I thought, okay, well, I'll talk about what we can get out of our garden because that was kind of what I was thinking of doing, what we can make with plants from the garden. And then I started thinking about it. The entire garden is a gift. Everything about it is a gift. It's a place to be on your own. It's a place to socialize. There's that kind of mindfulness that comes from focused activity. Of course, it's good exercise. I mean, the beauty of the garden restores frayed nerves. If my daughter is getting a bit cross, then she goes and looks at the pond and she goes and looks at the frogs and she feels immediately better. You know, there are so many gifts that we get simply from being connected to our garden. I will talk about plants as well, but it just made me think. I just felt full of gratitude for my garden actually, and of course it's wildlife. We've got frogs, we've got bees, we've got all sorts of interesting things. And it's not just a sort of general feeling that we feel better when we're in our gardens. It's actually kind of been proved time and time again by scientific studies. The Japanese government have been recommending walks in the woods since the 1980s to improve health, lower blood pressure, and generally boost immunity. And what they found out that it actually decreases cortisol levels, so it decreases stress levels. And there are also some interesting aromatic compounds that come out of, well, they did it with woods, but also all the plants that we're surrounded by. And they act a little bit like aromatherapy oil. So every time you do any gardening or sit in your garden, you're surrounded by all these wonderful plant chemicals, which help restore and balance our health. They've actually been shown to reduce cancer, decrease blood pressure, increase immunity, help with heart disease, help with problems like depression, anxiety, attention disorders, and all this just from walking in a wood. And I don't think any studies have been done on gardening, but I can't see why it would be so much different. There was also a really interesting study by a Californian group, and they said that being around, they were talking about tall trees, and they said that inspires awe. And they said that once awe had been inspired in someone, then they became less selfish, less, they didn't use the word aggressive, but less insular and less sort of focused on themselves, and much more willing to share, much more willing to be helpful and generous, which I just thought was such a lovely thing. And I don't know about you, but I feel quite awestruck when things bloom in my garden. I go out and I go, oh, and it's heart-stopping and it's wonderful. And it puts me back in my place because, you know, I'm running around with my busy human life and all my terrible first world problems. And I go out in the garden and I think, wow, it's all there. So I think having a garden probably makes me a better person, and probably also a lot of other people. And I'm very grateful for it. Of course, we do get stuff from our garden. We get materials and foods and also medicines. And when we actually start thinking about connecting with our own gardens, it becomes more sustainable because we don't have to go anywhere or package anything to get things from our garden. We therefore decrease our impact on the planet, which is always going to be a good thing. It benefits us by having that sense of satisfaction. Wow, I've got a sore throat. I've gone out in the garden, I've picked some sage. My sore throat's feeling a bit better. But we also, I think it goes beyond that. I think if we've invested time and effort and love into our garden, then there's something a bit more vibrant about the things that come from our garden. And if we can connect to that, it can't help but sort of boost our healing process. You know, there's a great deal of difference between buying a pot of thyme from a supermarket, which has just been shoved through a factory system and sat under artificial light, and picking a sprig of thyme that sits next to your door that every morning you go, oh, wow, look at that. And the bees are on my thyme today, and nurturing it and looking after it. So I find that quite exciting. And it, you know, that just strengthens our connection with nature. And let's face it, that's why being in nature makes us healthier, because we are part of nature. We forget it all the time, but we are part of nature. We're not always the most responsible part of nature, but we are part of nature. And also we're stimulated by the colours. You can probably see the calendula that I've got on the screen at the moment. I mean, that orange is just, wow. You can't really not feel happy when you look at that flower, apart from the fact they seed everywhere and they go everywhere. And sometimes I think, wow, there's a bit too much calendula in my garden. But it's vibrant. The colour green is soothing. The colour orange is uplifting. Every time we look at nature, we get some sort of visual stimulus from it as well. And I think what's really important about getting stuff from our garden is that we are taking something of our environment back into ourselves. We're very disconnected from the wild. We're very disconnected from our planet and from nature. And every time we take something that is grown in a free and sort of wild way into our bodies, we're just connecting ourselves a little bit more back to our animal selves, I think. Okay, so I just had a look around my garden, and I thought the three most common and easy things that probably most people have growing or know someone who has growing, and they grow everywhere. Because you don't have to get fancy to be benefiting from stuff that's in your garden. You don't have to be growing rare things or exotic things. There's a huge number of things that just grow. And actually, at Pestle and Daughter, we do a spring foraging walk, and that is literally just what most people would describe as weeds, which are growing abundantly in the spring, and actually are just totally amazing at cleansing the body and supporting the body. I'm not a herbalist, I'm a hedgerow-herbalist, so I'm not going to give you medical advice, but what I can do is just point you in the direction of some of the things that these amazing plants can do. When I say things grow proliferately, Calendula is a great example. I mean, if you keep picking the flowers, they will flower from spring until late autumn. In fact, the name comes from the Latin word calendae, which indicates that it can flower all year round. I don't think it would in this country, but certainly in a sort of Mediterranean environment it would. It just refers to its long blooming season, which also then means that it creates a huge number of seeds, which also means that it sells seeds everywhere. But it's beautiful, and if you don't want it, it's very easy to pull out. As I said, the bright orange colour, I just find it really uplifting. It's quite a stimulating colour. It's said to stimulate digestion, which is really interesting because it's a really lovely thing to put onto salads or, in fact, anything. You lose quite a lot of the colour and the flavour if you cooked it, but just sprinkling it on something that you cooked or putting it in salads. It's full of antioxidants. It's full of vitamin A because of the colour, but it's also just a lovely thing to put on it, and it sort of stimulates and lifts the spirit. There was a lovely article by a woman. I can't remember who she is. She's in America, and she had given birth in the middle of winter, and one of her herbalist friends had brought around this lovely dish of food, and they'd sprinkled calendula petals all over it. And I thought, yeah, that would definitely cheer you up. The old herbalists knew it as an antidepressant herb. It's not really so much used for that now, but that was what they associated with it, and I can't help thinking that it's something to do with the colour. As it happens, the green bit is the most potent bit. I don't know if you can just see on that top flower, you can just see the green bit at the base of the petals, and that's kind of sticky. If you pick them, you will get covered in kind of sticky, quite strong calendula smelling stuff, and it's kind of orangey as well. The sap is a little bit orange. That is actually the most potent bit, so that's the resinous bit. So if you're picking your calendula, make sure you pick all of it. And it will obviously take a little bit longer to dry than the petals, but just keep going. Okay, so I guess what you mainly know it for probably is wound healing. It actually helps tissues regrow, so it can reduce scarring, and it just makes things heal up a little bit quicker. So if a child or you have got a little cut or a scratch or a graze, then putting a tincture, not a tincture, you wouldn't want to put a tincture because that would hurt, an infusion, and I'll explain what that is in a minute, of the herb onto the skin, or even a compress. You could just mash up the flowers and put them onto the skin, would be great to help it heal up. The really important thing to remember is, because calendula is so very good at wound healing, is you have to make sure the wound is clean before you heal it. Otherwise you can end up with bits of grit or bits of yuck, whatever is in your wound before you don't want the skin to regrow before the wound is absolutely clean. It's antibacterial and antifungal, so it's good for things like acne, athlete's foot, dandruff, ringworm, things like that. Again, you could use it as an infusion, and the infusion is just tea. It's a fancy word for tea. So if you're making an infusion, you get your dried or your fresh herb, and you just pour boiling water over it, and you leave it and strain it off, and there is your infusion. If you wanted to keep it for a bit longer, if, say, you wanted to use it for depression, and you wanted to have some of this plant available for you in the winter, then what you do is you'd get the plant. You dry it slightly. It doesn't have to be dry. You could use dry, or you could dry it slightly, just so the water doesn't come out and dilute the alcohol that you're using. And then you just cover it in 40% alcohol. You could use vodka. Vodka doesn't taste of anything. Brandy, if you like the taste of brandy, that's fine. That's what a lot of flower essences are made from. But you just leave it in that, probably you could leave it for a couple of months. And then you've got a great way of preserving the herb right into the winter if you don't have enough space to store the dried herb and you just wanted to take it as a tincture to keep you going through the winter. It's good for eyes. So you could use an infusion to bathe eyes if you've got someone with conjunctivitis or they've got a bit of sawdust or a bit of grit in it or something like that. You could just use it as an eye cleanser. It's also really good to reduce the pain of ear infections. And again, you'd probably use it as a compress. So you'd probably mash up some of the flowers with the green bit and just wrap it in a piece of muslin or a pair of old tights or a pair of old socks or something like that and just hold it against the affected part. Or you could make an infused oil, which is done exactly the same way as the vodka. You dry the plant slightly, pop it in some oil, like a almond oil or olive oil or anything you wanted, really. Just try and make sure it's a good quality one. Try not to buy the absolute cheapest sort of cooking oil, but anything you like, and you just leave it somewhere warm, shake it around, and probably leave it for a couple of months, and then you'll end up with a lovely infused oil. And then if you're feeling fancy, you could make it into a salve by mixing it with some beeswax and some sort of liquid like rose water or something like that, or you could just use it directly. Another really easy way to use it actually is to infuse it in aloe vera gel, and that makes it really great for sunburn. Another really cheaty way, if you're feeling particularly cheaty, which is always good, is to get coconut oil and just heat it very slightly, put your petals and your green bits in, leave it to cool, heat it very slightly, leave it to cool, just keep, because coconut oil goes solid, so you want to keep it vaguely liquid or keep it in an airing cupboard where you can know that it's going to be liquid and infusing properly. And then you can just use, because then when it's set solid and you strain the plants out of it, you've got a balm that you don't need to actually create into anything because coconut oil is solid anyway. So that would be really brilliant. So it's good for skin, it's good for things like eczema. It doesn't address the underlying causes of eczema, but if you've got sore, painful, itchy eczema, it's great for that. Acne, dermatitis, burns. It's also very good internally. It's a good digestive remedy. So it's good for heartburn and reflux, and it's said to be gentle enough to use for children. So if you've got children who've got a little bit of an upset tummy, feeling a bit agitated, then just a cup of calendula tea, and it tastes good as well. It's not one that's horrible, because sometimes they don't like taking herbs, but it's a good one. It's also good for sore throats. So if you had a sore throat, you could gargle with your tea, and like I said, you could use the oil to massage if you had something painful. Good for varicose veins as well. So if you had varicose veins, you could just massage a bit of the oil into it. Okay, I'm just going to move on to our next plant, which is lavender. So you can see that the lavender's gone over a little bit, but that is one of the very, very, very many bees that has been frequenting the garden. My lavender grows all the way over the path, and I keep thinking, gosh, I ought to cut it back, but no one's ever complained. I think we counted 12 or more varieties. So that is my gift to the bees, is that we have lavender that's almost as tall as me now, actually. I guess everyone knows lavender. It's soothing and calming. But I just wanted to talk you through a few other uses, because it's prolific and it's also incredibly useful. There's just such a huge number of things you can do with lavender. There's many, many, many varieties of it. This is just common or garden English lavender. And they're all useful. Some of them are hardier than others. So everyone knows it soothes and calms, and it's good for insomnia. It's also good for headaches if you rub it on your temple as an oil or as an infusion. It actually comes from the French word to wash, and we can still use it nowadays to freshen things if you make lavender water. So when I say make lavender water, it's the same thing. You make an infusion, and then you can use it to sort of wipe down surfaces, or to put as a cupful in your last rinse in your washing machine or something like that. It does freshen, but it is also antimicrobial and antifungal. So it freshens with its scent, but it also can help destroy nasties in our environment and also in our washing, which can make things smell a little bit funny. So yeah, it's antifungal, which means that it is great for things like athlete's foot, ringworm, again, dandruff, cradle cap, and thrush. If you want to use it, but you don't want to put the oil or the plant directly on you, you can just take it as an infusion, as a tea, which is quite strong. You don't want to let it go too long. Or you could just use it as a rinse. So if you were doing something with your hair and you didn't want to leave the lavender in your hair, you could just use it as a rinse. It's said to be really, really good for hair loss. I've never actually tried it, but if you make an infusion of rosemary and sage and peppermint and lavender and use that as a rinse after you've done your, after you've washed your hair, put it through as a final rinse, and it's said to stimulate hair regrowth. I think probably if you massaged it in as well, that would be great, because actually the massaging action helps stimulate the scalp and you're more likely to get hair regrowth. As I said, it's antiseptic and it's also anti-inflammatory. So if you had a burn, an infusion of lavender water would be fantastic. Of course, when I'm talking about all these things, you can have essential oil as well, but I didn't want to talk about essential oil because that's something you can buy from a shop, which is fine. Probably most people have got a bottle, but I just wanted to talk about things that you can do with you. Again, you can make a poultice, which means just mashing up the plant and putting it in something and applying it. It's good for acne, partly because it's antiseptic and partly because it actually helps clean the skin as well. It's very good as a digestive aid. It's quite interesting. When I started doing these plants, I realised that I'd chosen all three of them. We'll come on to the last one in a minute, but all three of them are calming and soothing. So I don't know if that's a kind of call out from the universe that that's what I or everyone else needs at the moment. But anyway, I apologise that they've all got a similar theme, although it means that then you can combine them, which is probably a good thing. So they're good. It's good for digestion. As I said, the tea is quite strong. You would not want to leave it for very long while you're infusing it. It's you really get the oil out of it quite quickly. You think, gosh, that's really quite potent. But it's great for vomiting, nausea, gas, and bloating. So it's a really good one. It would be a good one for an after dinner tea or something like that. Or even if someone suffered from car sickness, it would actually be great for that, because some of the car sickness is usually a little bit of anxiety, but also the nausea as well. So it would actually be a really good thing to take in a little flask with you when you were going. It's been proven to be really good for pain relief. They've done it even on sort of big things like C-section scars. These are small studies, but they have been shown to work. And again, you could make, in fact, talking of essential oils, you could make your own oil in exactly the same way as you made the calendula oil. It wouldn't be strong. It wouldn't be an essential oil, because an essential oil is extracted directly from the plant. But a lavender oil infusion would be potent, and it would be very effective. So you could use it to massage on things. If you've got pain, even for things like joint pain and muscle pain, it would actually help with that. It's got a really interesting compound in it called ursolic acid, which has been proven to be anti-cancer. If you wanted to use it for that, I would suggest that you did some more research. But it is interesting, I think, how plants are being looked at more and more. I think as our health needs become more complicated, and as drugs develop, and as interactions between drugs develop, it's quite interesting to me that they're going back to plants in lots of ways to look at actually what's in them and how they can be used to support our health. It's an interesting plant in itself, actually. The roots can absorb heavy metals, and therefore it can be used to restore contaminated areas. So if you had an old industrial site, or even in your garden, there's always patches of gardens that have been used for interesting things. We had a bomb shelter in ours, which is now covered up. But there's often bits of ground that aren't necessarily old sheds and things that had horrible roofs or whatever. So if you planted lavender, you would then be able to clear the ground. You would then not want to use the plant. You wouldn't want to use the flowers from it or anything else. I mean, you could leave it there to look nice, but then you'd want to discard the plant, because unfortunately for the plant, it would then be toxic. Nettles do a similar thing, actually. And again, you have to be a little bit careful about where you forage nettles from, because you don't want to be foraging them from somewhere where things have been left to go unpleasant. Lavender said to improve memory, which is probably a good thing. So that it would be probably a good thing to have around exam stress, actually, because if you were anxious and your memory was going, then perhaps lavender tea would be the right sort of thing. It's also, I said the oil is very potent. It is. It's actually been shown to be effective against nits. So if you've got any of these friendly little visitors in your hair or anyone else's hair, then lavender oil mixed with a bit of tea tree oil and massaged in and then combed out would be fantastic. It is also, which is quite interesting and not something I knew until I started looking into it, it's also been used to decrease menopausal flushes, particularly if there's any sort of anxiety related to them. So again, having the tea would help, or you could, again, make a tincture out of it in the same way as I described for the calendula. Just put the flowers into something, cover them with alcohol, leave them for a couple of months, and then strain them off. Okay, so my last plant is Paciflora. And Paciflora, I love it. It grows absolutely everywhere. It rambles, it goes everywhere. And if you were looking for a gift, really, if you stuck that on your coat and pretended it was a brooch, I don't think anyone would be any the wiser. They're incredible. They fascinate me. They're a little bit like mandala meditations. I can stare at them for hours. Well, I never stare at anything for hours, but I could do if I gave myself the opportunity. It's an interesting plant because its name, passion flower, actually came from the Spanish missionaries, because all of the sort of symbolism that they saw in the flower reminded them of Christ. So what they said is it has 5 sepals and 5 petals, which represent the 10 faithful apostles. They've excluded Judas and Peter, so they've just got the 10 there, which are the bits around the outside, the pale green bits around the outside. And then they said there's 3 stigma, and they represent the nails that Jesus was nailed to the cross with. They have 5 anthers, which are the 5 sacred wounds. The anthers are the sort of, so the stigma are the brown bits at the top. The anthers are the sort of T-shaped green bits that stick out underneath that. Then they said the tendrils, which you can't actually see in that picture. I didn't take any pictures of that, but the plant clambers everywhere, so it has tendrils. It sort of clutches onto things, a bit like not wisteria, clematis does. They said that represented the whips. And then the filaments, which are the lovely blue bits around the outside, that represented the crown of thorns. So I just thought that was really intriguing. That's not my cultural reference for that plant, but I just thought it was really fascinating that they could see everything that they needed to within that one flower. Because to me, it looks like a mandala, but that's just my sort of, that's my standpoint. And that also tells me that plants have separate gifts for everyone. Some of their therapeutic benefits may be shared, but I think your actual interaction and your affection that you have with plants, it's quite a personal thing, and people resonate with things better. So I might tell you that Paciflora is a soothing plant, but you might find lavender better, or I might tell you that lavender is good for something and you would find calendula better for it. So I think we develop our own personal relationships with plants, and I can't explain to you what that is. It must be just due to our resonance and the fact that we're all individuals, we're all unique. So although they have common properties, there might be ways that you engage with them in ways that other people don't engage with them. So traditionally, Paciflora was actually used for bruises and cuts. But now I think it's probably known better as a nervine tonic. So that means that it calms the nerves. So it's great for stress and anxiety, and it's also really good for sleep. It's a particularly good one for insomnia, obviously, particularly where it's associated with anxiety. Probably the best way to take it is a tea again, and I quite like the taste of the tea. It tastes a bit almondy to me. I like it. It's a good thing. You can use the flower or the leaves, but the stem and the leaves are actually the most potent bit of the plant. And I think what I did a few years ago is I just picked loads of it because it's in long tendrils, and I think I made a sort of a wreath out of the leaves, and then I just let it dry, and then I could just pick the leaves off when I wanted to. Obviously, they get dusty after a while, or they do in my house anyway. So you might want to put them in a jar after a while, but they just look so very beautiful as their wreath that it seems a shame to not have them there for a while. It's really great for back pain, especially when it's caused by nervous spasms. And you could make an oil, again, out of the leaves, or you could take it as a tea, or you could, again, make some sort of tincture out of it. It's great for menopause. It's been actually shown to reduce hot flushes, and it's got an interesting link to menopause and depression. There's two compounds in it, which I'll try and pronounce, chrysin and benzo. This is my writing, actually, that's letting me down now. It's got two compounds in it, and I'm going to leave it at that. But what they do is they increase the action of the inhibitory neurotransmitters, which means that they actually have a calming and regulating effect on the brain, which means that they are able to relieve depression. They have antioxidant compounds, and again, the scientists have been looking into them, and they found something called quercetin, which is particularly effective at reducing the damaging free radicals and inhibiting the enzymes which cause inflammation. So it's fantastic anti-inflammatory and antioxidant properties. What I always wonder about when they start isolating these compounds from plants, it's a bit like taking a vitamin pill. It doesn't act in quite the same way once it's out of the plant. So I don't know, maybe I'm old-fashioned or a purist, but I think that you get more benefit from taking the whole plant because you get the compounds interacting with all of the other things that the plant puts into itself, rather than just trying to extract it and either sort of create it synthetically or indeed just extract it. So, I mean, there's a place for extracting things because sometimes you can't have the whole plant, you can't handle the whole plant, you can't store it, whatever. But I just think that having it as a sort of holistic package probably is quite effective. Sometimes you don't get such a concentrated dose, so maybe taking both would be the right thing to do. It reduces blood pressure, which you might guess from the fact that it's calming, but it's so effective that it's said you should avoid it if you're taking it with drugs that lower blood pressure already. And with that in mind, actually, Calendula and lavender, they're both very safe. They're both very gentle. Lavender oil is toxic if you take it internally, so you wouldn't want to do that. Also, it tastes revolting. I can't think that you'd manage to take it internally. Tea is absolutely fine, but concentrated lavender oil you wouldn't want to do. Calendula, if you've got an allergy to a daisy family or ragwort family, you'd probably want to avoid it. And it's also, hang on, there was one more thing, sorry. It can stimulate menstrual flow, so you wouldn't want to take it if you're pregnant or trying to get pregnant. The same with passionflower, actually, it's a uterine stimulant. So again, you'd avoid it if you were pregnant or trying to get pregnant. Incidentally, Paciflora is really great for bronchial disorders and asthma as well. It helps to clear the pulmonary tubes. So if you're congested, it can help sort that out. And the other really interesting thing, mine hasn't started flowering yet, but it has orange fruit on it, which are a little bit like the passion fruit that you buy from the supermarket, but they've got smooth orange skin and they have got seeds in. To be honest, they don't taste it very much, but the colour just means that they're absolutely full of vitamin A, so they'd be really, really nutritious. They don't taste horrible, they just don't taste an awful lot, but they would be really great. We've talked about infusions and teas, but a really, really nice thing to do if you are suffering from sort of depression or stress or anxiety is actually to throw a handful of these plants into your bath with you. If you want to keep it clean, then put them in an old pair of tights or an old sock or something. But you can just put the plants into the bath and whatever qualities they have will infuse into it. So lavender would be great. And in fact, you could use a combination of them, really. So I'm nearing the end of what I wanted to say. Thank you so much for listening. It's been really lovely to be here. It's such a shame that we are not actually at the Garden Festival, but we will all be there next year. Fingers crossed. And I'm very grateful for the team behind the scenes who have actually made this happen online, because it would have been a great shame if the whole thing had just disappeared into a cloud of COVID. So I think they've done an amazing job. If anyone wants to check out what my friends and I do with our business, it's Pestle and Daughter. There's a website. There's also a Facebook page, which I'm not terribly good at keeping up, but it's been really great to be here. So thank you very much. And if anyone's got any questions, I am ready.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Kelda. And good afternoon to everyone at home. That was such a brilliant talk. Thank you. Really inspiring and soothing. I felt very calmed by the end of it, so I was grateful for that. Lots of great tips to take away too. We do have a few questions for you, Kelda, if you're happy to answer them. A first one from Katie in Bosbury. She says, when applying these plants to the skin, how important is it to prepare the skin beforehand? Do you wash your face first with clean water and then apply, or do you just use the natural?
Yeah, you're better. Yeah, otherwise it's trying to fight its way through a layer of moisturizer and yesterday's sun cream and everything else. So yeah, if you try and make sure that your skin is dry, and obviously if you get any sort of reaction to it, then stop using it and rinse it off straight away. I mean, they're gentle plants that I've shared with you, but people can react. So yeah, make sure it's clean, make sure it's dry, and obviously, if you're trying to heal a wound, you're going to have a break in the skin, but otherwise try to make sure that you haven't got anything that's going to aggravate. Yeah.
Okay, so it's about making sure that your skin has a
big chance of connecting with it. Yeah.
Got you. Brilliant. Thank you. Another question from Leslie in Ross-on-Wye. Where is the best place to source these sorts of plants from? Is it always a case of growing them in the garden, or are there other places we can pick them up?
No, you don't have to grow them in the garden. You quite often find that friends have got excess. If you can't, then there are herbal apothecaries often sell them dried. There's good old Amazon. There's also a company called Tree Harvest, which does lots of dried plants and flowers. And probably, I'm just wondering what's local to there. I can't think of anything off the top of my head. If you want to drop me an email, I will have a investigate and have a think about it. But certainly you can get them from Tree Harvest. Some health food shops will order them for you. And there's an apothecary in Ledbury. And yeah.
Brilliant. Fantastic. Thank you. Our last question is from Ken in Malvern, and he's asking if you have any COVID-related tips. He says, particularly we're having to wear a face mask so much now. Is there any way we can adapt it to using some of these plants that might make the experience a bit less unpleasant?
Oh, that's really interesting. Yeah, I can't go against Boris Johnson's advice to wear face masks, but I'm just wondering actually if you rinsed or soaked your face mask in some lavender water and then dried it, it would certainly smell a lot better, and it would also be antimicrobial. I don't know necessarily that it's antiviral, but it would certainly smell an awful lot better. And you could also, I know that people have made their own sanitizing gel just by getting the pure alcohol and then putting lavender oil and things like lavender, lemon, anything you want really, but certainly lavender because it smells good and it's also anti-everything. Things like tea tree and stuff like that, they don't smell quite so good, but they would be certainly good for fighting off any nasty bugs. But yeah, I'm not sure we can get around the mask thing for a while. No, but yeah, perhaps you can make your mask smell a little bit more pleasant.
That sounds like I'm going to be doing that myself. We have actually just had one quick question in at the end, so we will make this the last one if that's okay. How can we infuse children to learn more about the qualities and uses of plants?
Bring them on a Pestle and Daughter course. No, we do run courses, but the way to infuse them, honestly, is to just get them involved in it. So you can start with really, they like making tea. I mean, if they can go and pick themselves some tea and make themselves what they consider to be a magic potion, that's fantastic. They also, on the magic potion theme, you can make infusions with them. You can do things like if you get plain shower gel, plain bath gel, whatever, you can put petals and things in that and infuse it, which is really great. You can buy melt and mold, I think it's called melt and mold or pour and mold soap, which is really easy. So you just heat it up gently. Obviously, they'd need supervising. And then you just put a load of plants in it and then set it. And then they they're using their own plant soap. They love making things in terms of food. So if you ask them to go and pick a few handfuls of flowers to put on their salad, I think or any other type of food if they eat salad, calendula is good. Nasturtium is entirely edible. What else is good? Some of you look it up, but the small violas, they're edible as well. So there's all sorts of borage, obviously. There's all sorts of lovely plants and flowers that you can just throw onto things which make them look pretty, and use them to decorate cakes, use them to decorate your savoury foods as well. There's just one more thing that I thought would be good. There's lots of things, but yes, making anything into flavoured butter. So if you've got a herb in the garden, like garlic butter, just make thyme butter, rosemary butter, mint butter, anything. We made, in the spring, we did wild garlic butter with damper bread. So we went out and cooked damper bread on the fire, and then we smothered it in wild garlic butter. And I think we'd also put other things. I think we'd put cleavers and nettle and all sorts in it. And it was just fantastic, and they loved it. Anything to do with food or making magic potions, I think is probably the way forward.
Well, now my mouth's watering. Thanks very much for that, Kelda. That sounded delicious. And yes, thank you again for a brilliant talk. We are coming to the end of the Helen's Garden Festival Reimagined weekend. We've got one event left for you, which is starting in about 20 minutes' time on the same channel at 4 o'clock. That's our CBD workshop with Paula Trafford. But for now, we'll thank Kelda, and a quick reminder of our Just Giving page. That's justgiving.com/crowdfunding/HGF. So thanks, Kelda, and see you next time.
Thank you so much for having me. Great. Good luck with the rest. Bye-bye.